Welcome back to the Football Fitness Federation podcast. This is episode 172. I'm delighted to be joined on the podcast today by Head of Physical Performance at Malmo, Mark Reed. Mark, how are we doing?
Good, thank you. And yourself?
I'm all good, mate. I'm all good. Now, we've had quite a few back and forths on message recently, but it's been a long time since we've properly caught up. So thank you very much for coming on.
No worries at all. Yeah, it's been, what was it, 2016, somewhere there?
Probably, yeah. Probably back then. I've not actually checked the date of that last one, but it's a fair while ago. And people that have had a reasonable gap from either speaking to or coming back on the podcast, there's normally loads changed and changed clubs and all the rest of it. And you're still at the same club. I know the situation's changed, the roles have changed and stuff. So it'd be interesting to hear the differences. And I know we're going to get into that in a little bit, but I know you did it on the first podcast, but do you want to just give us a little bit of background on yourself, mate, that led you up to the role with Malmo?
Yeah, sure. I'll speed up this time. I think last time I was a bit of a long-winded one, but yeah, Cornish boy at heart, of course. Went through university, bachelor's, then went to Cardiff to do my master's at Cardiff Met. Jumped on an internship at Swansea for a year down there, then went to West Brom. Another little step, went to do an internship there, which was quite varied. You went on different teams, 21s, 18s, down with the youngsters, and then a couple of months up with the first team. And then that came to an end that I was put in as the under 18 sports scientist when a little bit of funding came up for that role. I was there for a little bit, and then just randomly a job came up at Malmo. I think it was through connection of the fitness coach at Malmo, who was with the Premier League at the time. And I don't know what really made me go for it, but it wasn't really a question in my mind. It was, all right, just put your CV in, let's go for it. It wasn't, it was like, I'm going for this job. Managed to get an interview, flew over on the day of the interview, drove down to London, flew over, was a couple hours late for the interview because the flights were a nightmare. And I think I said this on the last podcast. It was really nice weather as I turned up, which it is not. I'm looking out my window now. It's super grey over here now. And then so it was a quick interview with the sporting director and head of academy and head of fitness. Flew back that day, and then got a phone call the next day to say, we'd like you to come over. Handed in my notice at West Brom. It was coming up to the end of the season. I think there was like a 2-week period where I had time to go back to Cornwall, see the folks, and then I was flying back out middle of the season. And they'd just gone into the Champions League that year. That was 2015. So they were going in to play Real Madrid, Paris Saint-Germain, Shakhtar. And then it was, of course, it's the youth league as well. So I flew straight into that, and we were going. So we were traveling to Paris, Madrid, which was lovely just from a personal perspective to go and travel around Europe almost straight away. That was flipping out. That was 2015, so 7 years ago, and I'm still here. And I've got a Swedish passport now, so I can travel a little bit more flexible. But no, it's flown past really.
Mate, 7 years, that's quality. And in that time, obviously, your role was changed, because when you first went out there, I can't remember your official role, but it was more academy focused. Is that right?
Yeah.
And then obviously now with the first team, and I know we're going to discuss some factors around that, but what are some of the biggest changes for you that you sort of felt with that transition? Like you said, I came in as academy S&C coach, or the academy S&C coach, because there is still really not, there's a little bit now, but there's still really a pathway or a profession for S&C coaches with academies. They've still got it with most first teams, especially in the top 2 leagues, that they've got fitness coaches. But back then, there certainly wasn't anything with youth teams. So I came in as the youth team fitness coach. And again, that came from their first entry into the Champions League in 2014, when they went and played, I think, some Greek clubs, some Italian clubs, and they pinpointed from the board perspective that they felt that they weren't physically there. So they put a little bit of finance towards that, of bringing someone over. I was lucky enough to come in as that person. And that was the first, up till 2020, that I was the lead fitness coach for the academy. And
a one-man band for a good couple of years. Then myself and the lead fitness coach, Ben Rosen, who's left us now, we started to, how are we going to move this department on? And we started an internship program, firstly within Sweden, and then we opened it up to Britain as well. And we linked up with a few universities. I think Game Changer Performance, we had a few guys over from there. So then it became myself and an intern with the first team. So we had sort of 4 of us in the department. And then that's developed a little bit more to sort of part-time roles within the academy to support the lead S&C coach. And you can imagine that. I mean, I was down there for 5-6 years from a complete blank canvas where there was absolutely nothing. So we managed to do a real good groundwork and base and foundation to get it in the place that it is now, teaching the coaches about S&C, sports science, periodization, how we plan weeks, getting the players used to strength and conditioning, GPS, and just the stuff that they weren't getting before. And the club is the aim is to try and be like an Ajax, like someone of that standard, to be a club where we create this pathway of top class academy players who come through us, and then they probably get to our first team for a year or two, and then we sell them on as well to make us sustainable that way. And that's what we've created, or what we created back then was this nice sort of funnel up to the first team. And then I think we left it in a pretty good place. We wanted to be there or thereabouts the best department in Scandinavia. There's a few clubs who are there with us, but I think we probably were. And then Ben left and went to Copenhagen across the water. And then the question was asked if I would be interested, which of course I said I would be interested to look at it. And also, but my thing was I would like to go in as well as to oversee the whole pathway from top to bottom. It was probably a right time for me to move on to something different, just to get that different stimulus. It'd been, like I said, 5 or 6 years putting that all together, that blank canvas up to, right, we've got this sort of process now in place. And of course, the club did their due diligence and went and looked at other fitness coaches for the first team as well, and then came back and said, actually, I think, we'll go with you. So that was exciting for me 18 months ago that I went in with the first team. And sort of took over this role of head of performance, if you like. Of course, my daily stuff is with the first team, but then setting that structure from us all the way down to the academy with processes we put in place, staffing, and I think we'll talk about a bit later with sort of the interview processes we put in place and putting the right people in the right positions. And of course, it's such a different role. I spent maybe 7 years of my life working in athletic development, developing players, having that time to help players grow physically and have those players that are so enthusiastic because they want to make it to the first team level. You've got time, you can make mistakes, of course, with academy players. And almost, you've got a routine as an academy member of staff. You've probably got a day off a week, which doesn't change. So you've got a little bit more of a normal life, if you can say that. You might have a Sunday off every week. Of course, that can change. And then switching over to a first team role where it is totally different, and it's very, very chaotic, and everything really is about 3 points at the weekend and winning titles and getting into Europe and keeping players fit, healthy, and interested. So it's completely different than what it has been the first 7 years. But like I said, it's probably something that I needed at the time, a new stimulus in my life, something a bit different. And it is a totally different role. You probably think going from you're still a fitness coach from the youth team. I'm leading the academy up to the first team, but it's a lot more individualized. We've got a squad at the moment. It's quite big. We've just started pre-season, 24, 26 players. That'll come down a little bit, but you've got 20 players on different individual programs, where maybe in an academy it's more of a bucket groups. You've got 3 or 4 different groups within squads. You can manage this, you can manage this. We've got these players doing this, where
Now it's how can we keep Ben fit? How can we keep Ben on the pitch? We've got a gym session, but Mark's doing something totally different to the rest of the group because we're modifying him. He can't do this specific exercise, or he can't load vertically, or whatever. So it's very, very different, but it's also super interesting.
I suppose with that as well, though, being at the club, and not only being at the club at that length of time, but seeing and being in control of how the program has developed over that time, obviously working closely with Ben when he was at the club, it's got to be a big benefit then looking from your position now down to the academy and fully understanding it, hasn't it? Not going into like a new club. And you can see the systems and stuff that have been put in place, but everything that's happened over that period of time. That's got to be a big benefit, surely.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that time, Ben at the time was also going away with Denmark. He was going with the national team, so they made it to the World Cup. They were traveling for, there's like 6 international breaks through each calendar year. So during those times, I would be up with the first team. So I already had that knowledge, if you like, of what it takes to be up in that first team, even if it was only for a week at a time, or when the World Cup was on, it was 2 months, and they changed the manager at that time. So it was like new head coach came in, Ben wasn't here, so it was me and the head coach straight away. That was the first face he had, so I already had that little bit of shit. I need to know how to deal with a brand new head coach who's going to change everything. And like you say, now I can look back down the tunnel, have a look what has been done. I can see what is needed for players to come up to the first team, and I think we have done a good job in the past. I think you can see that now. We've got they do a lot of over here. They group players by the calendar year they're born, so we can see now we've got sort of born 2003s coming up into the first team, and you can see those ones born 2002s, 2003s that physically they're completely ready for us to work with when they get to the first team. They can load very well, they move very well, whereas maybe if you get a player in from a random country who's coming in straight to the first team, you've got a bit more time that you've got to put into them to get them where you want them to be. So that's quite good. And of course, the people that have come in and taken my role with the academy, they've got completely free range to develop that however they want to. I don't want to go and say stay like this. This is how I set it up. We've got a great. Firstly, when I left, we got a guy called Matt the Pledge, top class. It was a bit of a coup to get him over to Malmo to get a top practitioner over. Matt's moved on now, and we've got a guy called Miguel over, who was at St Mirren in Scotland. So again, we're still trying to get top quality practitioners over to come into that role. So Miguel's come from St Mirren, really, really very good coach, and loves working with growth and maturation. Did his masters as well, and he's been at Cardiff Met, so he's had that quality of lecturers who really go into the growth and maturation of things, and that's what we're looking for, is that top quality practitioners to come in, and now it's up to Miguel to develop that the procedures down there as he sees fit, but obviously on our guidance of this is what we've been doing over the last couple of years. You can change it as you see fit.
Yeah, brilliant. I was going to ask as well, can you give a little bit overview in terms of how the staff structure has changed on obviously sports science or S&C, because I know there's been a big transition from, I'm guessing it was probably just you and Ben initially, or if anyone else was involved, obviously you can give a bit more information around it, but then how it looks now as well. Yeah.
So I think if you go back to, the year before 2014, so what's that, 8 years ago, it was just Ben. So it was just one fitness coach. Then I've come in 2015. So we've got one at either end, one with the academy, one with the first team. As I said, then we were playing with the idea of internships. So we got a couple of guys in from the UK. And now we've pushed that on a little bit. Now we've got a part, we've actually he's about to start, he flies in today, actually, ironically. We've got someone to come in, and we've started a new sort of side of the academy. So we want someone to come in and lead our 14s to 16s, a lower end of the academy, to give Miguel a little bit more of a focus on the upper end, those transition into the first team. So we've got a guy coming over to lead the lower academy. And we've also got a
a women's team that the club, I don't think it wouldn't have been there when we spoke last time, but the club is owned percentage-wise by the supporters, 51%, so they own a chunk of it, and the club wanted to put in place a women's team. We were looking to take over, maybe take over is not the right word, but there was a local team who were at a very high standard already. So the question was asked, do we take over this club as Malmo FF? The supporters said no, they would rather start at the bottom and work the way up, which was absolutely fine. So the club said, all right, let's do that. So we started a women's team right at the bottom. But of course, because we are the biggest club, they were able to bring in some really good players already at like the sixth tier of women's football. So there was people who had played in the college system in America, like top standard here in Sweden, because they were going to play for Malmo. Yeah. So the club said straight away, all right, we're also going to make our staff in the same level. So we're going to have maybe 3 coaches, a goalie coach, a physio, a fitness coach. So we've also put in that now as well. So we've got, his name is Jared, who's coming over. We've got him from Notts County. So he's just finished his, can't even think of the English word now, by the way. My English is all over the place. I've lived this so long, but yeah, notice is the word I'm looking for. He's just finished his notice from Notts County. So he'll come over and he'll lead the women's team and also the 14s to 16s.
Brilliant.
Bottom part of the academy. And then you've got Miguel, who'll oversee the whole part of the academy and that link coming up to us for the first team. And then up with myself, we've got another Brit called Jamie, who's taken a bit of a focus on the rehabilitation side of things and the S&C with our injured players, who works full time up with me with the first team. So there's 4 or 5 paid staff with us. We've also got some working with the girls, so the academy girls teams, and then we've currently got 3 interns, who are 2 working down with the academy, and we've got 1 up with us with the first team. We can talk about that a little bit later when it comes to interviewing and how we're going to bring him over, because I think that's quite interesting how we brought him over. But so it's effectively 7 of us now, if you look at it like that, okay, 8 years it was one, and historically before that it was always 1 fitness coach. So we are trying to push it to be the best, to have the best provision with all players, so they get quality from 14-year-olds all the way up to when they're 34.
Yeah, no, it's brilliant. And we talk about reflection a lot on the podcast, and for you personally, that's got to be pretty pleasing to think about the amount of opportunities you've given people. And I know it's improved the program by getting people involved, but also to give people that opportunity, it's got to be pretty pleasing to see the amount of people in roles now. Yeah,
exactly. And that's something that we, an internship is a difficult one. It's a touchy subject you see on Twitter and everywhere as well. But, the guys that we've had over, we've had a couple that have stayed with us because they're too good to let go. They made themselves indispensable at the club of gone, and we've gone to the club and said, look, we need to keep this guy or girl. They're top class. We need to keep them in the role. We've had one that's just left us who's gone to Iceland to lead a role over there. We've had a great coach that came in very early. He's gone back to Southampton to work with their academy. So some have gone to New Zealand. So they've had that opportunity to come. And also, it's not very often you get the ability to go and do an internship away from the UK, go and experience life in Scandinavia away. And Malmo is a good place to go and do that.
Yeah, no, brilliant. And on those sort of hires of staff, you've obviously talked a lot about the skills that each practitioner brings to the role, or even the different roles that they've gone into as well. But I was going to ask from you, in terms of characteristics you look for, because you'll get interest from a number of staff and obviously skilled members of staff as well. But through all these people that have had opportunities at Malmo that catch your attention, what are some of the sort of key characteristics in terms of their personality that sort of stand out for you?
Yeah, I think it's a fun one as well. I think that when you look at it, when you step back and look at it, I do think that when we're recruiting as we do in football, it can't be left to the HR department. It's not like, a librarian or whatever that we've got. It can be left to a specific
department to recruit. I think that it has to be left with the fitness coaches who are currently in place, and the head of performance or head of sports science or medical, because it's going to be us that are going to be working with that person day in, day out. You know, you need to know that you can trust them. And I think that's a big thing. A few people say you need to be able to go for a pint with them. I agree with it, but I also disagree with it. You've also got to know that, I mean, for us, as I talked about at the start, we've had a massive COVID outbreak in the last couple of weeks. You've got to know that if you're down, someone can step into that role, and you can trust them to keep the ball rolling. And also to be there consistently throughout the year when it's dark days and it's long hours. You've got to be able to trust that person to be in the role. So not only are you going to be able to get on with them, surely you're going to go for a pint with them as well, but they're going to be good practitioners, and you've got to be able to trust them massively. But I think Alex Gross said it a little bit. I can't remember a podcast a long time ago about having the right people in the specific jobs, whether it be coaching, medical, or fitness coaches. About there should be specialists working with academy athletes. There should be specialists working with first team athletes. We shouldn't just see it as performance staff or fitness coaches, because it's so different working with the academy players and the first team athletes. And I think one thing that is my pet peeve is when we have put jobs out there, whether it be, we've done a lot in the last 3 or 4 months, is recruiting for, as I said, that new 14s to 16s role, the women's role, with a couple of internship roles that have gone out. My pet peeve is when it's very clearly, and that's why I put it myself, is you must have a passion for working with adolescent athletes.
Yeah.
And one of the questions that comes back is, will I have a chance to work with first team players? And it really annoys me, because it's so clear that we really want you to love working with those level athletes. And there's some great practitioners out there who are so passionate about that. So that already, for me, call it a bit brutal, but that's like a big, all right, no, like you're already off if you said that. And it sounds brutal, but you know how many people are getting churned out of universities now, and then you've got to filter that down to who you're going to speak to, whether it be at the moment it's Zoom and Google Meet or whatever, and then you've got to narrow it down. So if you're looking for someone who's passionate about athletic development and they've already said they want it, like, what's it going to be like working with first team? Then it's already a little bit annoying. So I would like straight away someone who's like, this is what I want to do. So our first team, as I've said, Jamie, who's from the UK as well, on his interviews 5 years ago, we gave him the question because we had 2 positions, academy or first team, and he was like, I want to work with first team. So it was clear, crystal clear.
Yeah.
And no messing around. I want to work with performance sport and that only. And the same with academy level adolescent athletes. I want that drive to develop athletes, have time to work with them, because they're so different. I think you need to, if you're working with a first team, you need to have thick skin. You need to be able to take responsibility when stuff goes wrong. You need to, and we talked about the word banter as well before. There's a lot of joking and messing around with first team athletes, and when they're all in the gym together, and you need to be able to, knock off some of that comes at you. You need to be able to take that on board in intense pressure situations when games are tight and you need to do things quick and drastically. You need that person who you can trust. Right, we need to get this done now, not someone who's going to be a daisy picker and looking up at the sky. And on the flip side, with an academy recruit, you need someone who's got, soft skills, who can deal with 100 different athletes of different backgrounds, potentially be that multidisciplinary sort of approach where sometimes you're a fitness coach, sometimes you're a psychologist, sometimes you're looking at someone's come to you and they're talking about their girlfriend's finished with them. You need to be able to almost be a coach, a parent, a guardian, and everything with these academy athletes. But first and foremost, you need to be a bloody good coach if you're going to work with the academy athletes, because that is going to be the bulk of your time, is be on the pitch. Whereas a first team fitness coach or S&C or really rehabilitation specialist yeah, you'll have a couple of hours per day on the pitch and maybe a half an hour in the gym. But the majority of the time, he's going to be also looking at sports science on your computer, looking at trends, data, speaking to coaches. And maybe you need a bit more of a specialism, being able to deal with adults and the questions that come at you from a head coach, whether it be, what's the food looking like down in Marbella next week, or why has this player got a problem with their blisters on their heels? You know, it could be questions like that. Whereas as an academy fitness coach, all I want to know is that, can you coach for 6 hours a day? Are you a top quality coach? Can you manage 35 kids on a cold November grey morning in Malmo? Do you know what I mean? So and I try and draw them out of, it's very difficult nowadays over video calls, of course, but can you try and draw some of those qualities out of the people we're interviewing to see if they're the right fit for us over here at Malmo?
Hey, that I was literally going to jump in when you first started mentioning that and ask, like, if coaches are listening, how would they know who they want to go in and have the confidence, like you said before, to say, I want to work with academy players, or I want to work with first team players? And you've answered that absolutely perfectly, because I think that was such a good breakdown for coaches to hear, because you talked about the differences, not only with the characteristics that you need, and the coaches should listen to that and be like, and question whether it is something that fits with them. Because in the first team environment, it is very, very different, isn't it? If you don't have the thick skin and you don't have the sort of ability to control a big boisterous group of players, like it's going to affect what you do, isn't it? Whereas your skill could be, and it's not a regression or a negative at all, to be working with players that are in the development stage of the career and be spending, like you said, spending more time actually coaching, developing these players, getting them ready. And I think we fall into the trap a lot of the time, don't we, on what you mentioned before, where coaches think they've got to go academy and then end up in the first team. And I personally agree with you. I don't think it has to be the case. I think people need to realize where their skills are and the impact they can have in both.
Absolutely.
So no, I think you brought that down perfectly, mate. I was going to jump in with questions, but you basically just answered them all.
Sorry, just waffling on. Sorry about that.
No, brilliant. It was really good. Because I was going to ask around the skills and characteristics of first team and academy, and I think you've tackled that perfectly. So we'll move on to some of the recruitment now, because I think there'll be certain people on both sides of this, coaches looking to recruit and going through that process, and obviously there will be, hopefully this will go out to a lot of people that are looking to land the next opportunity as well. So hopefully you can give a bit of advice to both. But there's a lot of noise. Like when we talked about some of the topics to discuss, you mentioned about the noise in recruitment, and I fully agree. There's a lot of stuff out there, isn't there? So how do you go about sort of ignoring all that and getting what you want out of the people that you recruit?
Like I said, this last 3 or 4 months we've done a bit, so it's been, as well as finishing the season with all the madness of off-season programs and dealing with a peak of, I mean, we won the league on the last day of the year. It was literally the last game, so it was chaotic.
Celebrations.
It was crazy. So you imagine that on top of having to recruit X amount of people as well. And as I said, I wouldn't change it, because I want to know, and I want to lead that process of who we're getting in the building. I wouldn't want to leave it to HR or X to get that person in. So and I think firstly, you're going to get applicants who just see the job, especially if it's advertised through the club that we're looking for a fitness trainer. If it's not via myself or other colleagues on Twitter or whatever, if it's advertised through the club, we're going to get, Joe Blogs applying it for it because they've worked at the local gym with or a couple of football players, and they think that they make the new fitness coach. But we're looking for top quality recruits, whether it's for a paid position or an internship. And I think if we just take internships, if we go for that specifically, because otherwise we're going to be here all day, I think that even with the roles that we put out, we were getting like hundreds of people applying that want to come over from, also put it out to lots of European countries as well. We had a lot of applicants from Portugal, from Spain, UK a little bit, not as much now with Brexit, and there's a few different issues with that, but the amount of applicants we get across, I think that there's so much noise, and each individual has got to try and paint a picture of themselves to you from step one of that applicant coming into your inbox to potentially their last interview if they make it that far. And the first steps are, of course, and I know that some people have done some great work on this. I think Callum Walsh did quite a bit on CVs and covering letters, and there is some great stuff. I think Matt Jones as well. But you get CVs that are like 5-6 pages long, and you're thinking, you know, if this is myself who's working in pro sport, I haven't got the time to read 50 CVs that are 6 pages long.
Yeah.
So I firstly wonder, and there's of course some great universities out there, but I wonder, could we be a little bit better with helping students with skills to apply for jobs? Not only teaching them about pro sport and what it takes to work in pro sport, but getting that foot in the door. Because I think, I won't mention the universities, but we had a few that have come through from specific universities, and it's been, I've looked at myself and my colleague who works with the first team and said, we can't take any of these from this specific university. It's like they're rubbish. It's a shambles. So I think that cleanness of the first application, whether it's 1 or 2 pages of a CV, it's information which is important, you know, and by that I mean not that you've worked nights in Tesco's, but if you've worked a Friday night for 2 hours working with the local rugby club, that is way more important.
Yeah,
I'd rather see that. If you've traveled and gone to Uruguay to coach with a rugby team for a couple of months, you've paid for yourself to go to Spain and work for a month on a work placement. I'd much prefer to see that than that you've worked in H&M or something for a couple of nights a week. So I think those cleanness of the application, and then it comes to the covering letter, not just waffling on about what you did as an 18-year-old, how you think that your skill set would fit this. Like, can you keep that to a page? And then basics of getting the person's name right, especially if it's stated. And I'll move on to this in a minute, because as you can see, I'm getting annoyed about this. But if it says if it's saying Ben Cartwright, then write dear to Ben Cartwright. Don't write dear sir or madam, because I already know it's to you. And then one thing that really annoys me is, please email this for specific details. And then there's information on LinkedIn. You get people messaging you on Instagram, Twitter, and it's like, it specifically said email. Do you know what I mean? So if you're going through LinkedIn, you're already out for me.
Yeah.
Like, you've got to be concise, follow the instructions, be super clean with your CV. Club name, is the club name wrong already? There's so many small details of all these little things have got to be. It's not rocket science. It's basic things to try and get you through the net and get you up to these application processes. And then, like I said, the ones that we've gone through recently, and it is difficult because you've got to try and judge someone as a coach for a video call, which in itself is very hard. We've been very lucky with that recently, and so I think that it's working in some way. And we had that discussion with our academy S&C, Miguel, who said, should we get them to video themselves coaching? And I said, well, we got you, and we didn't watch you coach, and you're a top class coach.
Yeah,
so I think you can draw things out of course, you've got to go get your references and speak to people who know them and see, actually, are they a good coach? So that's important. But yeah, when we come down to the interview process itself, we've done a little bit of like, here's a scenario. Can you give us firstly like a PDF back of how you would coach the situation? And then we'd get them to go through it. And a couple ones that we've had recently are the ones I've loved, is ones that when we've questioned and said, do you think that's appropriate for this specific group at this time of the year in this weather? And the ones who've gone, you know what? No, now I've thought about that, let's scrap that. And they've talked about a new one on the spot. And I thought, that's exactly what I want, because that's what you're going to get. It might be you get to a pitch and the coach goes, that coach is sick with corona. Actually, you've got 60 kids. Deal with that. You know what I mean? So it's, if someone can already in an interview process change their session plan and give the reasoning behind it in the space of 5 minutes while they're nervous, and we're talking for an intern as well, then like that says so much to me. And then also, and this is a difficult thing as well, but finding the right type of intern who's not overqualified, because you'll get a few that have already been at 3 clubs and you're thinking, why have you been at 3 clubs? Why have you got a role?
Yeah.
And also you've got ones that have no experience. So you also want one in the middle ground who is going to come in and learn from what you've got in place, but also give you a little bit as a club. So it's super, super tough. But yeah, that's my thoughts quickly around it. I know, and the CV and the covering letter ones are so blatantly easy to cut away when you have those 5 or 6 pages, just a total mess. And even coming across in different languages, like you put the application out, should I say, in English, and the application coming back to you is in Spanish. You're thinking, but if you did any research, you'd know that I'm English, I can speak Swedish, I definitely cannot speak Spanish. So why is it coming across in Spanish? You know what I mean? So just basic little things.
These things though, they probably seem little to a lot of people, but like the names and the name of the club and all that, they're just mistakes that shouldn't. But not even mistakes, are they? They're just things that shouldn't be done, because that person going into that role, if that's how their standards are set, like it's not going to align with what you want. And I don't even mean just you. I mean any club. Like there's going to be situations where they're not going to deal with things that well, are they? Because this is obviously where their standards are at. But then when you said before about showing the ability to sort of adapt, to maybe critically think and sort of think on the spot and all that sort of stuff, I think people forget that is such a good skill to have. And it's a bit of like transparency in an interview as well, isn't it? To say that I'm not just going to have all the right answers in front of me. I'm going to be human. I'm going to make mistakes and show that I can actually adapt. And that's obviously, and I get why that would be impressive, because that's like the nature of the majority of roles, isn't it?
Yeah. And when I said, like, you've got to, from start to beginning, that you've got to paint this picture of yourself. And I think that's so important. So of course, if you've messed up, you're out already. For example, let's say you've not made the cut, but you have made the cut, you've made the interview process. Even up to that last time you hang up the phone, like, can you leave a lasting impression on the people interviewing you?
Yeah.
I think 3 of the people that we've got in over the last 4 years have been people who didn't get the role the first time round.
Yeah.
But because they've left such a good impression, we've gone back to them. And I mentioned it earlier on. So the one guy we're going to get in when we come back from a training camp soon, we interviewed him for an academy role. A rugby player, someone who's working with Olympic sports, lives out in Holland, but he's like half Austrian. And myself and the academy sports scientists, we went through who we're going to take on board, and we took someone who we felt was more suited to the academy side of things, who had more coaching experience with young athletes, adolescents, had a better understanding of growth and maturation. But then over Christmas, when we had our off season, we spoke as a department about possibly getting an intern with the first team this year. We didn't have one last year, but we thought about it. And without advertising the role, I already knew that this guy that we had interviewed for the academy role, this guy over in Holland, that he would be absolutely perfect for the role. As I said earlier, he had that aura of being able to work with first team players, very open, very friendly on the interview process, and you already feel that you could chuck him into if someone was sick with a COVID, or he could bounce off first team players, and it wouldn't be a problem. He could be the butt of the jokes, no problem, and he wouldn't take it harshly. So we went back to that guy and we said, look, we think you're more suited to the first team role. Would you be interested in coming over to join us in Sweden? And he'll come out and join us in a couple of weeks. So, even if you haven't got the first role, make sure you leave that lasting impression, because it might come back in whether it be a couple of weeks or it might be a year away, that they come back to you and maybe ask you the question.
And again, that just comes back to standards and how you come across, doesn't it? Because you might move on to a different role and then something might come up at a different club or you might have a conversation with someone at another club who's got an opportunity, and then you just don't know where these things are going to go, do you? And I spoke to Jordan Tyro a few episodes ago, and his role that he's just got now has come from a similar sort of circumstance. So it just shows that sort of thing happens, and people going into these interviews need to understand that, don't they?
Yeah, exactly.
So,
and it's not, it's not, okay, I didn't get the role, it's done. You know, they might come back to you and they might give you the shout, or it might be, we did a recruitment drive 3 years ago and we couldn't find anyone. But I'd spoke on Zoom to someone a couple of months before, just a general chat, who reached out and said, do you want to jump on a call? I've got half an hour. And then it was, right, we've not found anyone for the role who would fit this academy role. As I said, great soft skills. But actually, this guy I spoke to a couple of months ago, he might be interested. So reached out to him, and sure as heck, we got the other guys in, spoke to him on Zoom, and then we recruited him in as well. So
yeah,
even like your meeting, like the network meetings, if you paint yourself in a good manner, you know, and someone picks that up, that actually that guy was top class, I could really work with him, or I could see him working with a group of 14-year-old athletes, or then it will pay off in the end.
Yeah, every conversation is an opportunity, isn't it? Like, you just don't know where it's going to go, whether it is on Zoom, whether it's in person, whether it's on a touch line 2 minutes before a game or after a game. Like, you just don't know where these conversations are going to go, do you? So you've got to keep your standards up and like you said, make a lasting impression, because you just don't know where that'll benefit you in the future.
Exactly.
Brilliant, mate. I think we've covered some top stuff there. I was going to jump into the quick fire, but one thing just before we do, the UEFA B in Swedish. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
Because I think we spoke just on that. I think we spoke in the first podcast about obviously being in Sweden and learning a new language and stuff. And you've been there 7 years now. So obviously you've get into a good position in terms of language now to be able to do a qualification like that.
Yeah. No, yeah, I think my level of Swedish is, I can understand a lot now. So I'm almost fluent in being able to understand and listen and be in meetings, no problem at all, which is good. Helps that I've got a Swedish missus now as well. So we're getting married out here this year.
Brilliant.
So that helps big time. Of course, there's family get-togethers and stuff where we've got to speak Swedish. So that's pushed me along a little bit. But going back to the CPD stuff, I think we touched on it before, but I think working in football, you get to a point, maybe it's elite sport in general, but I certainly get back from a week, even if I mean, what is a week anymore? You know, all rolls into one. But for me, CPD's it's very difficult to get home, sit down and read about something. The brain power's gone from the amount of energy you put in at work. So for me, it needs to be, I need to get away from football, firstly, but it be a totally different sport. It might be going to a physiotherapy conference. It might be something totally irrelevant and different. And that's been probably since the last time I spoke to you, about getting away from Sweden, not going back to the UK much for CPDs, but like traveling around Europe. And I've done quite a few of the Exos bits. I've gone to like Germany and France and really just, I did one of the 5-day ones in Racing in the rugby club, and everyone else was French. So it was only me that was English. And the presenter was American, so he spoke in English, and then everything was translated in French. The whole 5 days. So my brain was totally fried, but what an experience! An experience! So just getting out of the norm, really, is for me, because I really struggle to get home and just be like, right, I'm going to read about whatever. I'm going to read about collagen or this nutrition or acute to chronic ratio. Like, I really struggle with that. So I need to, for me, and it can be people might disagree with me, but I need to get away from the norm and try and go and do something. And then last year it was, right, let's completely go away from physical preparation in total. Let's go and try the UEFA B. And I tried to get on one in the UK.
I know I just said not come back to the UK, but I thought it'd be easier to get back. And I heard lots of good things about the Welsh FA and trying to get on that one. But because I was now a international applicant, they only took on like, I think out of 15 was like 2.5 people. I don't know where you get half a person from. And I think the two internationals was that after I found out was like Michael Ballack and Dante, like 2 ex-pros. I was like, no wonder Mark Reed didn't get on the bloody course. Do you know what I mean? So
I don't see it.
So
I don't see a reason.
So exactly. So then, right, it's going to have to be Sweden. Okay, so then I started one here, and then I had to come off it because of the new role with the first team, and it clashed a little bit. So I finished it this year, like the second half of the modules. But what an experience to get out of the comfort zone. Firstly, to get my head more inside of the technical and tactical side of football, because again, people will disagree with me, but the way I sit and watch games is I'm watching, right, if I can see Ben's got a little niggle as a left back and I'm on the bench, I'm just watching you for like 3 minutes. I'm not even watching the game go on. So I totally watch football on a match day totally different to the coaches. I'm really looking at, and then I'm talking to the assistant manager, what subs we're going to make. So I rarely have the opportunity to actually watch the game tactically. So that to go to do that, firstly, was a big challenge and really got me out of my comfort zone. But then to do it in another language was super tough. So luckily they let me coach for my assessment in English. And of course there was loads of better coaches from a technical and tactical perspective there than me. You know, there was loads better than me. But what I did bring to the table was organization, clear communication. So my session was pretty organized, and we're going to do this. I'm looking for this, like direct regain of possession. You've got like a 5-second rule to win the ball back. So I made it more of like a constraints-based approach. So, you know, I brought something very different to the table from a coaching perspective, but yeah, it was super out of the comfort zone. And I think for me, the way I'm going to go forward with CPD will just continue like that, not to just go down the route of more football, more research based around football, to really just go out. You know, we went to Barcelona with Ben actually before he left Malmo to go on a tendinopathy conference in Barcelona for like 3 days. And realistically, the most people there were doctors and physios. So we understood about 40% of what they were talking about. But the 40% that we learned was really nice. You know, It was really eye-opening. So just to get out of that comfort zone and go and do something different.
Quality. That's awesome, mate. We'll finish up with some of the quick fires. So the first one being, I know it's always hard for people to narrow it down, but who are some of the biggest influences on your career so far?
I think the first role model was my first boss, really, Ryland Morgans, who that first year at Swansea, to get to see him work, he was top class, really, really good. And I'll go back to West Brom and the class in like subunits we had there, like Matt Green on the pitch as a pitch-based fitness coach, top class. Organisation-wise, the way he used to set out stuff. And you had Barnesy, head of sports science, who was so lucky that we got to work with him and learn about GPS, monitoring, sports science. And then Nick was coming into the club, Nick Grantham, more of the S&C side. And that was, for me, when I reflect on coming into this first team role, because he came in about half the way through I was at West Brom, about how he tried to change the culture of S&C to get players into the gym, to keep it very simple, very clean, with regards to programming, never over complicating it, but making small steps at a time. You know, you don't have to go in completely rip apart a program and say we're doing 3 sessions a week, but how can we get those guys in the gym? How can we keep it competitive, creative? We're using this specific technique to drive intensity. So yeah, although it sounds boring, it probably didn't change since last time I've, spoke to you, but those guys have left a lasting impression on how I've got to now, for sure.
Yeah, brilliant. Some top names there as well. What would you say your biggest strength is as a practitioner?
Probably haven't got any. Maybe I don't know. I don't
That's
know.
definitely not true.
I think organisation. I think variety. On last year, I think we did the clear thing coming into last year was we wanted every match day -1 to be a different drill, different warm up. I think they ended up doing like 60, 58 different warm ups, and still to drive that intensity with the group, because I mean it's almost, I probably forgot to say this earlier, but working with the senior players has almost gone full circle and working with the young guys where it's a constraints based approach. You get to like 19, 21, they know what they're learning. Okay, we're working on max speed today, and it gets back to the first team players, and they don't really care.
Yeah,
and I think Keir said something on Twitter the other day about this. They don't really care what you're doing, but so all right, then it becomes you've got to create something to make them do what you want them to do. So it becomes more of a constraints based approach, whether it be like this is a deceleration zone and you've got to win the race, but if you leave that zone, you're disqualified. So then you've got, right, we're working on aggressive decels because they want to win the race, but then they know they can't leave the box, so they've got to slam on the brakes. And everything becomes like that with the boys because they just want to win. So the intensity's there, and then so it's because I think that's a strength of mine, is developing new ideas or variety to try and get around those constraints and to, how do I say, to yield the physical attributes out of the first team players, because they don't really care, in some way. They just want to perform, be fit, and compete with each other first and foremost, especially the older guys, and they're the ones who bring the competitiveness of you when we watch. And I try and do that, to watch warm-ups back and watch our sessions back to see what I could have done better. We use a speedo a lot, so you can hear yourself talk. Like, what have I said wrong? Right, that was pretty good. I'm going to use that again. We'll put that away in a log. And the older players, they drive intensity really, really well. So you almost don't, if you put on a drill, that they'll drive it themselves and they'll pull everyone along with them because they hate to lose.
Yeah.
And it might be older guys versus the younger guys. And it's just those little things. But yeah, I think I've waffled on, but organisation, variety, creativity with stuff we do with the first team players. And then, of course, there's loads of stuff which I still need to get better at, for sure. And that will never stop, I don't think.
No, I don't think it does in any role, does it? So, man, I think there's been some great stuff in there, some really, really good stuff. And it's nice to sort of see the progression, not only in roles, but in skills and the progression at the club as well. With, like I said, with the hires that you guys have managed to get in place, I think it's really impressive. So fair play to you and everyone that's been involved in that whole process and where it's going to be going forward as well. In terms of opportunities that come up at the club, or just keeping in touch with you and what you've got going on, where do you encourage people to look at? Would you say social media? Is it where do jobs go out? Do they go out on the club website?
Yeah, very rarely we put it on the website. I think we only put the one out recently to try, and we tried to. By the way, how dark has it got? Can I just say that? That's what I mean when I say it's got grey and dark in Sweden.
It's pretty much the same here, mate, to be honest.
No, what was I saying? So yeah, we very rarely put it out to. I would normally put it myself and my colleagues to put it out on Twitter and those things. This time we put it out through the club, and that was something as well that actually we didn't touch upon. Was that is a large majority of the time why we go to the UK and other parts of Europe to get especially specialists in growth and maturation, because it's just not here yet. We interviewed quite a few people on basic fundamentals of peak height velocity, et cetera, and it's very, very clear that the universities in the UK are doing a top job on educating people on working with children and adolescents. That the people who had not gone to university in the UK were miles behind in the interview process. So that's something that we need to improve in Sweden as well, and something that the UK needs to give themselves a pat on the back for, because the guys who had been to Cardiff Met, Hartbury, St Mary's, etc. There's many more, but they
the level of understanding already, even if they're just leaving uni, of beat kite velocity, growth and maturation was so much higher. The guys who'd been through the UK, but and that's normally why we put it on Twitter and yourself when we give it to you guys to give it to the guys who come to your network meetings and everyone who follows you, to get that reach, because you've obviously got such a good reach now as well that we can get a really good level of application. But normally if it's not on Twitter, but I think my handle is _readmark. Otherwise my email address is mark.read@mff.se. So always happy to jump on a call if there's time. There's not much time, but I try to make some space here and there. So don't kill me if I don't get back to you within a couple of days, but I'll try and get back to everyone as soon as possible.
And if anyone's looking to work in an academy there and sees Mark over in the UK, be nice to him, because that's your opportunity.
Yeah, exactly.
No, mate, thank you very much. That was absolutely quality. I think we've covered loads of great stuff in that. So I really appreciate you coming on, and it was good to catch up.
Yeah, thank you very much. We'll leave it another 7 years.
No, can't be as long next time. Thanks, mate.
All right, thank you very much.